Dale Whitmore stepped onto his own porch with a suitcase at his feet and the calm fatigue of a long drive still in his shoulders. The key slid into the deadbolt and stopped cold, as if the metal had hit stone. He tried again, slower, then harder, then with that small twist people do when they refuse to accept what they are seeing. Nothing moved. The lock itself looked wrong, too clean, too bright, too new to belong on his door. A faint manufacturer sticker clung to the faceplate, and the paint around the hardware didn't match the rest of the door, a rushed touch-up that assumed no one would look closely. Dale's eyes traced the edges, then dropped to a sheet of paper taped beneath the lock. One page, typed, squared, official-looking in the way forged authority always tries to look. Across the street, Patrice Holloway stood on her porch with practiced stillness, arms folded, chin lifted, watching as if she had scheduled this moment on a calendar. Dale did not shout, and he did not beg. He set his suitcase down, reached into his car, and pulled out the thick manila folder he never left behind. Then he made one calm call that turned a quiet HOA street into a problem no clipboard could contain. Dale was 63, retired after nearly 3 decades with the U.S. Postal Service, the kind of man who paid bills early and kept receipts out of habit, not fear. His ranch-style home sat in a planned community outside Scottsdale, Arizona. Green patches of lawn fighting the desert, tidy porches, trimmed shrubs, and rules posted like scripture for anyone who needed reminding. He bought the house in 1999 and paid it off in 2021. His deed was clean, recorded, and simple. His name only. No liens, no disputes, no fine print that could be twisted into a trap. For years, the HOA barely noticed him, which was the best kind of relationship an HOA could offer. He stayed current on dues, kept his yard neat, and lived quietly inside his own boundaries. That calm ended in spring of 2022, when Patrice moved in and brought a different kind of order, an order that required targets to prove it mattered. Within months, she had shaped a new position for herself as compliance officer, a title that sounded official enough to make neighbors hesitate before challenging her. She began walking the streets with a clipboard like an extension of her identity, measuring ordinary life against shifting expectations. Mailbox angles became offenses. Trash bins became scandals. Porches became evidence boards. The neighborhood learned her route the way prey learns a predator's habits. Dale read the governing documents carefully, believing knowledge would be protection. He did not yet understand that some people treat rules as weapons, not limits. The first time Patrice aimed directly at Dale, she chose something small enough to seem harmless, but personal enough to sting. Dale's side gate had rotted with age, and replacing it felt like routine maintenance, nothing more. He followed procedure, submitted a modification request, waited for written approval, secured signatures, and hired a contractor who worked cleanly and finished quickly. The new gate looked better than the old one ever had. Then Patrice left a violation notice in red ink, planted like a flag on his door. The hardware finish on the latch, she claimed, was non-compliant because it was brushed bronze. It was a complaint designed to waste time and test obedience. The documents called for neutral metal tones, and bronze fit comfortably inside that category. Dale responded the way he always responded to pressure: calm, structured, professional. He drafted a rebuttal, attached the signed approval, cited the governing clause, and printed copies for his folder. Patrice escalated in writing, turning a latch into a referendum on authority. The tone of her response carried certainty, as if her title allowed her to override signatures and reinterpret language whenever it suited her. She pushed the threat of inspections and penalties, not as a last resort, but as a first instinct. Dale did not match her volume. He tightened his process instead. He treated every notice like it might eventually land in front of someone who cared about facts, and he built a paper trail sturdy enough to carry weight. Pressure arrived in waves that never fully receded. Dale began receiving violation notices for things he could not confirm. A claim of unapproved exterior alteration when nothing had changed, a landscape deficiency on a week his yard had been professionally serviced, a pattern of repeat non-compliance that implied an ongoing rebellion. Fines were hinted at, then listed, then framed as inevitable consequences of his attitude rather than his actions. Deadlines shortened, the language hardened. Each letter carried the same message beneath the formal wording. Compliance was no longer the goal. Submission was. Neighbors started avoiding eye contact when Patrice approached, as if witnessing her attention could redirect it toward them. Some people repainted trim that did not need paint, swapped hardware that already matched, or paid fees they did not agree with, simply to quiet the pressure and protect their peace. The neighborhood changed shape around Patrice, bending away from conflict like grass under a heavy boot. Dale's manila folder lived on his kitchen counter, growing thicker with every printed email, every dated photo, every certified receipt clipped neatly to the next. He refused to fight loudly because loud fights fed personalities like Patrice. Then he left town for a short family visit. Days in Tucson with his daughter and grandchildren, a normal break that felt earned. He returned expecting another envelope at worst. He pulled into his driveway at dusk and saw fresh tape on his front door. The lock looked different, and the air around his house felt suddenly unfamiliar. Dale stepped up to the door and felt reality snap into place the moment his key failed. A home is supposed to accept its owner without negotiation, and the refusal hit him like a physical shove. The new deadbolt sat bright and unfamiliar, and the paint around it looked disturbed, as if someone had tried to hide the act in a hurry. Beneath the lock, a typed notice claimed authority under HOA documents. It asserted that a compliance officer could secure a property deemed an active violation when an owner was absent. It cited the gate latch dispute and listed prior warnings Dale had supposedly ignored. Dale knew those warnings had never arrived because he tracked his mail like a machine and kept records like a habit. The notice ended with a demanded administrative fee for restoring access, dressed in official language meant to turn extortion into process. Across the street, Patrice watched with contained satisfaction, as if she had rehearsed a confrontation that required Dale's panic to complete it. Dale did not give her the reaction she expected. He did not plead. He did not argue on the sidewalk. He collected the notice, added it to the folder, and sat in his car with the kind of quiet that comes from a man who understands systems. The call he made took less than a minute, and the documentation did the talking. He waited without drama, eyes forward, as minutes tightened into a countdown. Less than 6 minutes later, a dark SUV rolled onto the street with controlled purpose, like a decision made elsewhere, now arriving at his curb. The SUV moved slowly, deliberate enough to feel final. It stopped near Dale's driveway, and Reeves stepped out. Tall, steady, dressed in a navy jacket clearly labeled FBI Police, the lettering crisp and unmissable. No sirens announced him, no chaos followed, only the calm weight of someone trained to treat overreach as procedure. Reeves did not approach Dale first, because Dale was not the problem. He walked straight toward Patrice's porch with economical steps and a posture that never asked permission. Patrice's stance shifted before he even reached the steps. Her arms loosened, her confidence tightening into uncertainty. The clipboard suddenly looking less like authority and more like a prop. Reeves presented credentials and moved with patient certainty, making it clear through demeanor alone that HOA titles did not grant legal power over locks and entry. The street itself seemed to quiet as neighbors noticed what was happening. Curtains moved, a garage door paused halfway. Dale remained near his driveway holding the documents folder at his side, not triumphant, simply steady, because the outcome had already been set by the evidence he kept. A locksmith was already in motion, Summoned by the system Dale reached with the right number and the right paperwork. Patrice tried to reframe the act as governance and process, but the attempt hung in the air without support. The moment had turned, and the neighborhood could feel it. What Patrice had staged as a public display of control was now becoming a public display of consequence. The locksmith arrived and worked with brisk competence, removing the new deadbolt and restoring the original lock without spectacle. A receipt was produced, and the financial responsibility landed where it belonged. Dale accepted fresh keys that matched his own door again, a small object that felt like the return of oxygen. From inside his entryway, he looked out through the front window and watched the neighborhood recalibrate. Patrice stood in her yard with a phone in her hand, but her posture no longer broadcast certainty. She looked smaller, not because she had changed physically, but because the illusion around her had collapsed. The street exhaled in quiet, cautious ways. People watched without stepping outside, as if they were learning to observe power like weather, something that could shift suddenly and change the whole day. In the following days, the HOA management company issued formal correspondence acknowledging overreach. The board moved fast, not out of pride, but self-preservation. The compliance officer role that Patrice had built into a throne disappeared under restructuring language, and enforcement procedures were tightened so that no one could claim the right to interfere with entry again. Policies became clearer, not because clarity was valued, but because ambiguity had proven dangerous. Patrice resigned soon after and vanished from meeting minutes the way she had arrived, through paperwork. Dale framed the apology letter and hung it next to his paid-off mortgage statement, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that ownership is more than a deed. It is the right to be left in peace. And the lesson that traveled through the neighborhood was simple and durable. When someone starts rewriting reality to control others, the antidote is not louder outrage, it is cleaner evidence. If an HOA tried to push that far on your street, would you have the receipts ready when it mattered?